The Baltimore Orioles have had some very exciting and very important series wins throughout this season. But between the performances of Félix Bautista and Cedric Mullins this weekend, this series win may have topped them all. I'll recap it coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, August 14th, 2023, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap an enormous series win for the Orioles in Seattle this weekend as they went on the road and took 2 out of 3 from the Mariners. I'll recap both the wins on Saturday and Sunday, both in extra innings, getting you the 5 things you need to know from both of those games and highlighting awesome performances from Félix Bautista and maybe the game of his life for Cedric Mullins. Then we'll run through some roster moves the Orioles made over the weekend, bringing back Cedric Mullins, but along with Nick Vespi as well, and then saying goodbye to one of their veteran relievers. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So we jump right into it today. A series win for the Orioles over the Seattle Mariners, taking 2 out of 3 from the M's on the road this weekend. Now, it didn't start out too well. Orioles lost the Friday night game 9-2, but they came back with a vengeance, winning 1-0 in 10 innings on Saturday night and winning an absolute thriller, 5-3 in 10 innings on Sunday to take 2 out of 3 and take the series win and clinch the season series, winning 4 out of 6 against Seattle this year. With the 2 wins, the Orioles on the season now 73-45. The Rays also took 2 out of 3 this weekend, won the first 2 against the Cleveland Guardians, but got crushed on Sunday. So the Orioles coming out of the weekend, they remain 3 games ahead of the Rays in division standings. Now, I will say, Cleveland had a chance to sweep Tampa this weekend and really should have won the Saturday game. Cleveland went into the bottom of the ninth up 5-3 and had their all-star closer, Emmanuel Clase, on the mound. And he gave up 3 runs and lost the game. That was disappointing. But the Orioles stay 3 games ahead of the Rays. So we're not going to talk much about the 9-2 loss on Friday because, listen, Kyle Gibson got hit around. The Orioles offense didn't do much. And frankly, there wasn't much great to talk about. So let's jump right to Saturday. With the Orioles down 1-0 in the series, sending Cole Irvin to the mound, rejoining the rotation, and it's Felix Hernandez night at T-Mobile Park in Seattle, being inducted into the Mariners Hall of Fame. A lot of good vibes around Seattle that night. But the Orioles win the game 1-0 in 10 innings, and I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that victory. And the first thing you need to know is Félix Bautista was the better Félix and maybe the real King Félix on Saturday night for the Orioles. Despite all of the glitz and glamour around Félix Hernandez, Orioles legend, whom I loved as a player throughout his time in Seattle, it was Félix Bautista's night. Came in the bottom of the ninth, made quick work of the Mariners in a 0-0 game to send the game to extras. Orioles take the lead 1-0 in the top of the 10th, and Bautista goes out there with the zombie runner on second, with a chance to win the game, and he just goes to work. Filthy strikeout to start the inning. I mean, he basically just bared down, and it was some of the best work he's done all season. Filthy strikeout of Josh Rojas, 102 at the knees. Incredible changeup, striking out Julio Rodriguez, who whiffs on one at the knees. And then maybe an even better splitter to Eugenio Suarez, who chases one that started at the knees, darts into the dirt for a swing and a miss. 3 swinging strikeouts for Bautista in the outing, who goes 2 innings in this one scoreless, 1 hit, 4 Ks, and no walks on 28 pitches. He was just ridiculous. And yes, it did make him unavailable for Sunday, and we'll get to what the O's tried to do there, but The Mariners swung at 5 of the 8 splitters that he threw in that outing. They swung and missed at all 5. They did not make contact on the splitter on Saturday night. It was just ridiculous to see what he's done. Great stat from Nathan Ruiz of the Baltimore Sun on Saturday night. Félix Bautista has now, I believe it was 7 times or 8 times, I believe, that he has gone 2 innings this season. Hasn't allowed a run since he's done it. Unbelievable stuff from Félix Bautista. And hey, with all the weirdo Mariners fans booing him as he came to the mound and mad about him being called King Félix, which Orioles fans don't even do. It was just one joke made by Orioles Twitter. It was pretty satisfying to see him do that to them on Felix Hernandez's night. Second thing you need to know from this one is that Ryan Mountcastle just stayed hot in a huge spot in this game. The only run that was scored for either team was driven in by Ryan Mountcastle, who went 2 for 4 in this one with a couple of singles, but the big one came in the 10th inning off of Andres Munoz, where the runner on third and 1 out. Mountcastle destroys a single, 110 off the bat up the middle to score Cedric Mullins and give the Orioles a 1-0 lead. That was the only run, and Mountcastle did it again. He also had a 2-hit day on Sunday, coming up with a couple of infield singles as well. Mountcastle, for the longest time on Saturday, had the only hit for the Orioles offense. It was a 2-out single, or a second inning single, I should say, off of George Kirby, who was just incredible. Mountcastle, if you add, he didn't have a hit Friday in the loss, but he did have 2 walks in that one. He was, one of only 2 Orioles to reach base twice in the loss on Friday. And you're looking at Ryan Mountcastle at this point, and you're going, what is going on here? I mean, he was hitting .459 in August after the Saturday win. And if you include the 2 infield hits that he had on Sunday, helping the Orioles get the win there that we'll talk about, Ryan Mountcastle right now, and listen, he's been amazing, almost hitting .450 since he returned off the injured list from vertigo the day before the All-Star break. But not only has he been good the entire time since returning, he's seemingly getting even better at the plate, because now in the month of August, Mountcastle's hitting .463 in the month of August. Third thing you need to know from the 1-0 extra innings win on Saturday is that, well, there was really nothing else for the Orioles offense besides that Ryan Mountcastle RBI single. George Kirby was ridiculous, starting the game for the Mariners in this one, going 9 shutout innings with 7 strikeouts, no walks. He allowed just 3 hits in this game. Orioles only had 4 hits as a team. They got 3 in 9 innings against Kirby, had just 5 hard hit balls against him. George Kirby is the truth. He's one of the best young pitchers in all of baseball right now, and he certainly showed it off on Saturday. The Orioles just had no business against him in those 9 innings. It was fun to watch. But what I will say is Cole Irvin matched him for 5 innings on Saturday. Irvin, who has been in the Orioles bullpen for about a month now, but the O's deciding to go to a 6-man rotation starting this weekend, and they inserted Irvin as that 6th pitcher. And although he wasn't fully built up yet, so there was certainly a ceiling on how deep he could have pitched into Saturday's game, he did about everything he could have done in that one on Saturday. 5 scoreless innings with 6 strikeouts and 1 walk, allowing just 2 hits. He only threw 67 pitches because, again, he wasn't really built up to go more than 70 or so, but only 3 hard hit balls against him. He was getting some swings and misses that we haven't really seen from Cole Irvin this year, 11 whiffs. It was the fastballs that were really doing the trick. The 4-seamer and the cutter were just really, really good in this one for Cole Irvin. I was very impressed. He looked like, now not fully because, he's only allowed to go 5 innings and 67 pitches, but he looked like the pitcher that really frustrated hitters at times in his last 2 solid seasons with the A's before the O's acquired him in that trade this offseason. He's going to be built up more, which means if he's pitching like this moving forward, he'll do it for 6 innings, 7 innings, maybe more. That would be gigantic for this Orioles rotation and Orioles bullpen, honestly, as well. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles 1-0 win on Saturday is don't sleep on, the rest of the Orioles bullpen. Yes, Félix Bautista was downright incredible, but everybody else that went out there kept the O's in the game and kept it scoreless. Mike Baumann came out in the 6th. Yes, he did allow 2 base runners with a hit and a walk, but put up a 0. Jacob Webb, who is the Orioles' newfound relief ace, apparently, 2/3 of an inning scoreless. Then Cionel Perez came in, got a huge out in the 7th to keep it 0-0. Yennier Cano did give up 2 base runners in the 8th inning. However, he was able to get out of the jam and keep it 0-0. And then they turned it over to Bautista. After what was a really rough week for the Orioles bullpen, Saturday looked a whole lot better. And Bautista locks it down for the 1-0 win in extras to even up the series. So that set up a rubber match on Sunday. And it was another good pitching duel, but probably the only one of the weekend where you felt like the Orioles had the leg up with Kyle Bradish. Braddish pitched well. Cedric Mullins was a hero. And the Orioles were able to get that series win on Sunday. But I'll tell you how they did it coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. At this point, I love Game Time because it is the spot where I get a lot of my Orioles tickets. Buying tickets for favorite events shouldn't be stressful. And Game Time, well, it's the fast and easy way to buy all the tickets for all the events you want to go to, including the Baltimore Orioles. They've got killer last-minute deals on tickets right before the game. I mean, they've got these flash deals at Game Time where it could be 30 minutes before first pitch. You could be standing outside Utah Street. You could buy the tickets with a flash deal. They could be sent to your phone in seconds right on the app. And you can walk into the ballpark, get it scanned, go in there, have a great time at Oriole Park. And you always get the best price with the Game Time guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the Orioles were able to win the series over the Mariners this weekend, losing Game 1 on Friday, but coming back to win it 1-0 in 10 innings on Saturday, and they set up that rubber match on Sunday. Didn't have Félix Bautista after 28 pitches and 2 innings on Saturday. But of course it had to go to extra innings, didn't it? But the Orioles prevailed with a 5-3 win in 10 to take the series. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles win on Sunday. And the first thing you need to know is Cedric Mullins maybe had the game of his life in an Oriole uniform. And he didn't enter the game until the 6th inning. And oh yeah, I'm including the game earlier this year in which he hit for the cycle in an Orioles win. But he impacted this game in such a way that this will be remembered, as Kevin Brown said at the end of the broadcast, as the Cedric Mullins game. Let's start with, hey, he comes into the game in the 6th inning. Defensive replacement for Ryan O'Hearn. Austin Hayes, who started in center, moves to left. Mullins gets in there in center after he had come back from his injury this weekend. Started in center the first 2 games, but was on the bench for Sunday, and then comes in there. And you don't hear from him too much until the 9th inning. With Félix Bautista unavailable, the Orioles leading 3-2 after scoring a run in the top of the 9th, they turn it over to Mike Baumann. Now, it was a little surprising they didn't go to Shintaro Fujinami for the save, but honestly, I wasn't super surprised they went to Mike Baumann. Baumann gets a pop out of the first batter, Teoscar Hernandez, and then Ty France hits a ball a long way to center field. Off the bat of France, 103. Looks like it's going to be a homer. Cedric Mullins tracking back to right center field, and he makes an incredible leaping catch, glove over the wall to take away a home run for the 2nd out of the inning. Just an unbelievable catch by Mullins. Media asked him after the game, and he said, that's definitely in my top 3 defensive plays ever and maybe number 1. He was fired up. The team was fired up. What a freaking moment. What a play by Cedric Mullins. That is why he's so important to have back in this lineup and to have him healthy. But then something I don't think I've ever seen happened. So now there's 2 outs, and Dominic Canzone's coming up. Baumann first pitch outside, fastball for ball 1. There's 2 outs, nobody on base, just needs 1 more out for his first career save. And then he throws a 97-mile-per-hour fastball right down the middle. And Canzone absolutely unloads a no-doubter. 109 off the bat, 402 feet to right field to tie the game. I do not remember a bigger swing of emotions as an Orioles fan, at least this season, than those 3 pitches. It went Cedric Mullins homer robbery, keeps him in the lead, ball 1, home run to tie the game. I could not believe it. And Nick Vespi comes in, gets a ground out from Sam Haggerty to send the game to extras. So you're thinking, okay, what can they do now? Well, Cedric Mullins is due to come up in that 10th inning. And after an Anthony Santander ground out, pushed Gunnar Henderson to third, the zombie runner with one away, Mullins roped a pitch down the right field line, and it looked like it was a homer. And then it went foul by about 6 inches. And you're thinking, that was the chance to take the lead. Wait, maybe it wasn't. Because then Mullins gets another 96-mile-per-hour fastball in the middle of the plate from Trent Thornton. And this one he hammers into right field stands, but fair. A 2-run homer for Mullins, his first since coming off the IL, his first hit on the weekend since coming off the IL, 100 off the bat, 364 feet to give the Orioles a 5-3 lead. Has anybody else had a more impactful back-to-back half innings in baseball history than Mullins had right there? I mean, it was insane. And he gives the O's the lead. Just incredible, incredible stuff from Cedric Mullins. You absolutely cannot escape him. Second thing you need to know from the O's 5-3 win in 10 innings on Saturday is that it was an amazing bounce-back performance from Shintaro Fujinami, who at this point, I think we can just expect a pattern from Fuji. It'll be great outing, bad outing, great outing, bad outing. You think back to last Sunday against the Mets. Maybe the best one-inning outing we've seen from any Orioles pitcher this year. Came one pitch away from an immaculate inning, went 1-2-3 with 2 strikeouts, throwing 103. Then fast forward to Wednesday night, as he looked, I'll say, a little different against the Astros. Got 2 outs, then walked 3 batters in a row, and all of them scored as inherited runners. Then come back to Sunday with the Orioles leading 5-3 going into the bottom of the 10th. The only 3 pitchers in the bullpen were Félix Bautista, 28 pitches Saturday, not available. Jacob Webb, who was warming earlier in the game, but had thrown back-to-back days. And we know Brandon Hyde really doesn't like to throw relievers 3 days in a row. So your option was Fujinami. And what does he do? Come up with his first career save in either MLB or NPB in Japan. That's how big of a moment it was for Shintaro Fujinami. Now, he wasn't facing the tippy top of the order, but he goes 3-0 to Dylan Moore to start the inning with the zombie runner on second and a 2-run lead. James McCann goes out there, settles him down, and what does he do? Blows 3 straight fastballs by Moore for the strikeout, gets Mike Ford to fly out, and then on a 101.2 mile per hour fastball, gets Julio Rodriguez to ground out to short to end the game. No walks, retires all 3 batters he faces, gets his first career save. It's still going to be a roller coaster ride for Fuji in this Orioles bullpen down the stretch, but it's nice to note at the very least, he can have outings like this too, where he locks down an Orioles win and a series win. Third thing you need to know from this one, Kyle Bradish was great again. It's kind of going to get lost in this game because of all the heroics, all the craziness that happened in the final few innings. But Braddish just continued what has been an amazing last couple of months for him in an Orioles uniform. Just has continued to be really the Orioles ace at this point. 6 innings, 2 runs on 5 hits with 7 Ks and a walk, no home runs allowed. And he just was able to roll through that Mariners order. And Braddish now has a 2.65 ERA in his last 17 starts. Hat tip to Nathan Ruiz of the Baltimore Sun for that one. It's just really good stuff. I mean, he gives up a run in the 3rd, gives up a run in the 5th. And that was really all she wrote for Kyle Bradish. 15 whiffs for him, 9 whiffs on 16 swings on the slider. I just trust him so much. Every time he goes out there to start for the Orioles, I trust him a lot. And he showed it off again on Sunday. Fourth thing you need to know from this one, James McCann's just swinging a super hot bat right now. And yeah, he's not going to play every day, but McCann gets the start behind the dish on Sunday with the day game after a night game on Sunday. Adley was DHing in the leadoff spot. And McCann's just hitting right now. And the O's are catching lightning in a bottle a little bit with James McCann, who was hitting under 200 for most of the year. But he goes 1 for 2 with a single and 2 walks in this game and a run scored, now up to hitting 236 on the season. McCann now hitting 529 with an OPS over 1,300 in the month of August. He's going to cool off again at some point, but this is incredible what we're seeing from James McCann at the plate, and he's still been great defensively behind the dish. Just night and day from what the O's got from Robinson Chirinos as their backup catcher for Adley last year. And it's just those little things like James McCann hitting right now that are helping this O's team play so well. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 5-3 win in 10 innings on Sunday is we saw really the reason why Jorge Mateo is still on this Orioles roster, despite the 209 average, despite the sub 600 OPS, despite the defense not being elite anymore, still good, but not elite, despite all the strikeouts, he can flat out run. And after Jordan Westburg doubled with one out in the top of the ninth inning in a 2-2 game, the Orioles went to Jorge Mateo as a pinch runner. You might be thinking, Jordan Westburg's pretty fast and has been swinging it well. Why are you taking him out of the game for a pinch runner? I understand, if Ryan O'Hearn or, Ramon Arias or James McCann is on base, get Mateo in there. But Jordan Westburg, really? And I was thinking that a little bit, but Brad Brock made a good point. He said, remember last night when Cedric Mullins against Andres Munoz, who was the pitcher, stole third base because Munoz wasn't really paying attention. And the thing is, okay, with one out, Mateo could go get you third base just like Mullins did. And while he didn't steal the bag, Munoz was certainly worried about Mateo because he ended up balking, which allowed Mateo to go to third and James McCann to go to second after a walk with just one away. And then Adley Rutschman at the plate hits a little dribbler, not right back at the pitcher. It was kind of up the first base line, but Munoz came off the mound and fielded it quickly. I thought when the camera kind of zoomed in on Munoz fielding it, I thought, okay, he's going to look Mateo back to third, throw to first for the second out. And it's going to be an unproductive AB from Rutschman. But Jorge Mateo, he's going on contact. And somehow, some way, on just a little dribbler off the bat of Rutschman that traveled 8 feet, basically. I mean, not really 8 feet, but it was 8 feet before it hit the ground. Something that just dribbled out there, really, towards the pitcher. Somehow, Jorge Mateo dives in there safely ahead of the throw. It was an unbelievable slide to just get his hand in there before the tag and give the Orioles the lead in the ninth. And I get it, right? The bat's not there. The defense is down. But that elite speed could be huge. And there could be a spot just like that in a playoff game where you could put in Jorge Mateo, and if anybody else is at third base, the Orioles do not take the lead in the top of the ninth, and they may lose that game on a walk-off homer in the bottom of the ninth inning. Whether or not you agree with it, and I'm not sure I still do, that is why Jorge Mateo is on this roster, and he played a huge part in the Orioles winning the game on Sunday and winning this series over the Mariners, taking 2 out of 3. But the roster that did win this series for the O's did look a little different as they made a couple of roster moves on Friday. And also we got some other roster updates over the weekend. So to finish out the pod, I'm just going to run through those coming up next. So the Orioles take 2 out of 3 from the Seattle Mariners over the weekend to win the series. They're staying right here on the West Coast. No days off here, at least for now, in this 9-game West Coast trip. And they are right back to it coming up tonight against the San Diego Padres and their old friends, Manny Machado and Ryan Flaherty, who is still a coach on the Padres staff. This Padres team, I don't know what's going on there. They just lost 2 of 3 in Arizona. They're now 56-62 on the season. They're 5.5 games out of the NL wildcard right now, which isn't super strong. Just been a disaster season for the Padres. Not as much of a disaster as the Mets. Like, the Padres are still in it, but it has not been good. Well, tonight, more late baseball, so make sure you take a nap during the day if you're trying to stay up for this one. A 9:40 p.m. Eastern time start tonight for game 1 of 3 between the Orioles and the Padres. Grayson Rodriguez will take the hill for the Orioles in this one, trying to continue to pitch well since being recalled in an Orioles uniform. And he's going to go against a veteran ace. Yu Darvish is going to get the ball for the Padres in game 1. Hasn't been vintage Yu Darvish this year, but has still been pretty good at age 37. And it should be a fun pitching matchup in game 1 tonight. And you can catch every single pitch of the Orioles' hometown radio broadcast of that one on the SXM app through SiriusXM. Just download the app and search Orioles. But before we get to game 1 between the Padres and the O's, I want to get to a couple of roster moves that were made over the weekend to update you here on a Monday pod. And we'll start with the big Friday move, which, of course, paid off hugely in the Orioles win on Sunday that we just talked about. Cedric Mullins was activated off the IL with that groin issue that put him on the injured list for about a month for the second time this season. But Mullins played a couple of rehab games in AA and AAA last week. And then he came off the IL on Friday. As expected, as I talked about last week, Ryan McKenna was sent down to AAA Norfolk to make room for Mullins. Mullins hit 5th in the order, played center field on Friday, had an 0-for. Then he hit 2nd in the order on Saturday, also had an 0-for in that one as Gunnar Henderson got the day off. Then, as I mentioned, he was not in the starting lineup Sunday, entered as a defensive replacement in the 6th, and had the game of his life in that 9th and 10th inning to help the Orioles with the win. Now, the Orioles outfield could be getting even more reinforcements this week as Aaron Hicks went and played 2 rehab games in AAA Norfolk this weekend, 1 game in left field, 1 game as the DH. He went 1 for 8 in the 2 games. But it seems like he's healthy enough right now to rejoin the O's. And while the McKenna move was very easy for Mullins, this Hicks move is going to be a lot tougher. He could be back even today. It seems like, at the very least, at some point during this Padres series this week, Aaron Hicks is going to be activated off the IL, and the O's are going to have a really, really tough spot and tough decision here on this roster move. I mean, I essentially feel like they have 3 choices right here. Unless some injury pops up to a hitter that we don't know about, they have 3 choices. Choice number 1 is demote Colton Cowser. You know, he's been looking a little better lately, but he didn't play much this weekend, and, he's still hitting just above 100. It could be a good time to maybe get a reset for Cowser, and then maybe you bring him back up on September 1st, just a couple of weeks away when the rosters expand from 26 to 28. You get Cowser as your extra hitter, and maybe some time dominating AAA over the next few weeks will work out. Choice number 2 is DFAing Jorge Mateo. It's something we've called on here for a couple of weeks, and a lot of people have called on, but after what we saw Sunday, after what we're seeing his role being, I just don't see the Orioles doing that. I'd be okay with that move. I just don't see them doing it. And the third one would be bringing up Hicks and demoting a pitcher, like sending potentially Nick Vespi back down to AAA. Now, if the Orioles were going with still a 5-man rotation, I would actually predict the O's would do that. And they would go with 14 hitters and 12 pitchers for a little bit and kind of still figure things out with Cowser and Hicks and others. But because they've gone to a 6-man rotation now, they only have a 7-man bullpen, one shorter than the usual 8-man bullpen. Right now, you are not going to demote another pitcher and try to survive with a 6-man bullpen. That is just not going to happen. So I really, really don't see the O's demoting a pitcher. So it's going to be either Cowser or Mateo. My guess would be Cowser at this point. And then, there's no guarantee like Hicks stays with this team the rest of the year, but I think the O's like him enough and like what he's brought enough to at least give him another shot coming off this lower body injury. Now, Nick Vespi, as I just mentioned, reason why he maybe could be potentially the pitcher they would send down, although they don't think they'll do it, because he was recalled on Friday. Actually replaced Joey Crable on the roster. Vespi recalled. Crable optioned to AAA Norfolk. The Orioles basically just wanted/needed a second left-hander in the bullpen after Danny Coulombe went on the IL and Irvin was moved from the bullpen to the rotation as the 6th guy in there. CNL Perez was left as the only left-handed reliever in the pen. Although CNL had a great weekend, retired the only batter to keep it 0-0 on Saturday, had a huge 1-2-3 inning to keep the game tied in the 7th on Sunday. He's been great lately for the Orioles, by the way, looking a lot more like 2022 CNL Perez. But he was the only lefty out there. So the O's go with Nick Vespi, and Vespi pitched well. Inning and 2/3 scoreless on Friday. Got the final out of the 9th inning on Sunday to send the game to extras. And we'll see if he can kind of stick in the bullpen at least until Danny Coulombe returns for the O's. And then the final bullpen news was Mychal Givens was activated off the injured list Sunday and immediately designated for assignment. This is what I figured the Orioles would do. They were basically coming up here on the 30 days of his rehab assignment ending, so they had to make a decision. He doesn't have options, so you either put him on the roster or you DFA him. And it's just been rough. I mean, in his 6 appearances in the big leagues this year, kind of between the injuries, it was 4 innings, 5 runs, 4 hits, 6 walks, a hit batter, and 2 Ks, like not good. And he was really bad in rehab. I mean, just in AAA rehab this year, 7.27 ERA, not good. He just gave up 3 runs in an inning in his last appearance. The velocity was like 89, 90 with the fastball. It was a knee injury, then it was a shoulder injury. He's basically cooked at this point. I think the O's made the right decision. Just there's no way Mychal Givens was going to help your bullpen, so they designate him for assignment. And then the final personnel/roster move the O's made this weekend, well, you may have noticed, as I talked about last week, Kevin Brown was back. Made his return broadcast on Friday night, called all 3 games on Masson this weekend. As most of us expected, he did not address the situation at all, at least on the air in the broadcast open on Friday or at any time throughout the 3 games. Now, he did address it Friday afternoon, sent out a series of 4 tweets. If you haven't read them yet, go to Kevin Brown's Twitter account and check them out. I mean, people were excited. I was very excited to have him back. He had some amazing calls this weekend, just especially at the end of the win Saturday and Sunday. But I mean, this thing feels like it's not over. If you read that Twitter thread, those statements by Brown on Friday, I mean, I wish I was naive enough to think Kevin Brown wrote those. Those were clearly written by Orioles PR, probably by Greg Bader, considering the fact that Greg Bader was name dropped. 95% of people don't know who Greg Bader is. He's like the senior vice president of the Orioles. Of course, if he's name dropped, he's really John Angelos' number one henchman. Of course, he's going to name drop himself in there. But Michael Kay of Yes Network said it best. I mean, that read like a hostage statement. I mean, it truly read. It was weird. It read like a hostage statement. I mean, Kevin Brown's in a really weird spot. Dan Connolly wrote about this last week, about how weird of a spot he's in right now. You know, he's got a family. He's got a house in Baltimore. You know, he clearly loves it here, clearly wants to call games for these first place Orioles, wants to keep this job, and knows if he does anything but what the Orioles ask him for the rest of the year, they're going to fire him. And there's still a chance they would even move on from him this offseason. So if he wants this job, I get it. He's got to basically please the bosses. But when the bosses are that insane and that horrible, like John Angelos, it's a really tough spot he's in. I get what he did. Again, he did not write that statement. I think we all know that, but it'll be interesting to follow this along. Hopefully, at least for the rest of the season, nothing else comes up. We get some great Kevin Brown moments. He calls an Orioles pennant chase, and then in the offseason, we revisit the future of him with the Orioles. Hopefully he stays, but again, wouldn't blame him at all if he doesn't call any more O's games after this season. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Huge Orioles series win this weekend over the Mariners. Now, got a couple of things coming up this week on the podcast. Just wanted to kind of address them here before we go here on a Monday episode. I've talked about it before. I do work a 9-to-5 job outside of hosting this pod, which means West Coast games during the week are really tough for me and this podcast. I am going to do the best I can to have an episode up as early in the morning as it usually is with a recap of the previous night's West Coast game. But there is no guarantee that will happen. There is a chance that during this 3-game series this week against the Padres, there may be some episodes that come out that do not include a recap of the previous night's game because I just can't stay up this late while having to get up in the morning. Just wanted to address that now. So if you tune in tomorrow, I haven't quite made the decision yet on what tomorrow is going to look like. There could potentially be an early episode that doesn't include the game recap. There could also be an episode that comes out later on Tuesday, maybe like late morning, early afternoon, but it does include the recap. Just play it by ear. Look for updates at Locked On Orioles on Twitter. Again, these West Coast midweek games are tough for me, but I will do the best that I can. And also on tomorrow's episode, do know we'll announce the giveaway here for getting to 4,000 subscribers on YouTube. So make sure to subscribe to Locked On Orioles on YouTube to be entered for that giveaway. But that'll do it for today's episode. Again, I'll be back tomorrow with, no matter what, some Orioles content. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.